Hello, Precalculus. I know a lot of you said you thought that the homework would look okay, but to make sure it's going okay, because I know it's not due till tonight, some of you have maybe already tried it or started on it. I am actually going to go through one of the homework problems. I believe this is problem number 1. So hopefully if you started it or attempted it, you at least tried this one, and maybe you can see what's going on. So remember, first step, we got to write it as a matrix. And so guys, I'm going step for step with you here. And so hopefully everything goes smoothly. We got to look at this one over here. So off to the side here, I'm just going to write a small 4, negative 1, 1, 2. If I cross down, 4 times 2 is 8. If I cross up, 1 times negative 1. Guys, a couple of you sometimes we're forgetting to switch that. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1, meaning I'm going to switch it to a plus 1. And so I'm going to get 9. 1/9 is not necessarily going to distribute the nicest to that. So I'm going to leave the 1/9 out in front. So I'm going to write 1/9, and then I'm going to do my flip. The 2 and the 4, remember the 2 is last, it gets written first. The 4 was first, it gets written last. And my 1s both have to switch signs. So the one that was negative is going to become positive, and the one that was positive is going to become negative. Again, I'm leaving the 1/9 out in front. Some people choose, because they realize things are going to go okay, to put that 1/9 inside. Even though that 1/9 would give you some ugly fractions, it would work itself out. All right, so since that's what I have there. And so now I'm going to multiply. 4 times 2 is 8. 8, and then 1 times 1 is 1. 8 plus 1 is 9. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. 1 times 2 is 0. Negative 1 times 4 is negative 4. 4 times 1. Guys, remember, we're hoping to get something that looks really nice like I'm about to get. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. 4 times 2 is 8. 1 plus 8 is 9. But remember, I'm just working on this side right now. I'm not going to worry about the other side. If I distribute that 1/9, I am going to get 1001, which is perfect. That's what I want every time. And then that xy. 1 times x is just x. 0 times y. 0 times x is 0. 1 times y is just y. And so that's how that side should always work out, whether there's a 1/9 here, but once you get here, it should be that. All right, I'm going to go a little bit slower on this side. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. That gives me a negative 9. Negative 1 times negative 4 becomes positive 4. 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. 4 minus 4 is 0. And so if I distribute that 1/9, I get negative 1, 0. And that time, that one, there's only a few other steps that I have to copy. But that should be your answer, and there is your work, so you can even pause. And obviously, guys, if you're copying my work, that's okay. Hopefully you're not copying other people's work. I've noticed that's gotten better. Thank you very much. I actually appreciate that, okay? So, guys, today we're going to learn how to solve a different way by matrices, and I gave a few examples today. I forget what day I made it due, but I got to tell you, I at least want you to try these. Usually the first few times we do these, it is a little bit tricky and people are having some trouble with it. And so I'm going to work through this. If I find everything I need, sorry, I thought I had it right there and then I moved stuff around. I'm going to do this and work on this on the board that I brought home. I have like a mini whiteboard here at home, and so I'm going to work through it on that with you. But this next way is called augmented matrix. All right, so if you want to write that down and write that example down. All right, so I had this from my geometry classes, sorry. All right, so we're going to work through it on here, the first one anyway, and then maybe the other one I'm going to work through a little bit more on the paper, because that way the one you can see like step for step what I'm doing. All right, an augmented matrix. Augmented means make a little bit bigger, make a little bit different. And so we're gonna sort of have a square matrix here, but it's gonna look a little bit different. And we're gonna get rid of our variables. So I need to know the coefficients only, please, in the top equation. Those would be -2, +1, and then 9. Now guys, as I write this down, I'm writing something else in there. Where the equal sign should go, I'm making a vertical line to sort of separate my coefficient matrix from my answer matrix. Give me just a second. In the bottom row, my coefficients are 1, 3, and the answer is -8. All right, so if you would write that down right next to each other, hopefully it makes sense where those comes from. This is called an augmented matrix right here. This part right here would be the augmented matrix. So please, if at least anything else, and all of your homework tonight, write down the augmented matrix. In order to solve a system of equations by augmented matrix, what I'm going to have to do is change things around in here. It's kind of like elimination, to tell you the truth. And as I'm working through it, the first one I always do completely by myself. And then the second one, usually I try to take suggestions from people. But I want to change some things around so that eventually the one side of this would say this. And I'll tell you what to do, and we'll do it together on the board in just a minute. Because if this is all it says x plus 0y. So x equals whatever. And then this would be 0x. Y equals whatever. So we want to get our answer to be in the pattern of 1, 0, and then on the other side of that dash line. So we want this side to be the identity. 1, 0, something on the other side, that's our answer. 0, 1, and then that's our answer. And then our answer would be right there, okay? So I know this sounds a little bit tricky, but I'm going to tell you there are 3 rules we can do. Rule number 1, sometimes it might work for us to switch things around. That's going to work really nice on this first one. We might be able to switch things around, but if you're going to switch things, you have to switch whole rows. Please remember that this row right here represents an equation. So I can't just make the 2 go wherever I want, because the 2 has to be attached to the y and the 9. The 2 has to be attached to the 9 and the y. Step number 1, if you want to, you can switch whole rows around. Number 2, if it helps, you can multiply a row by something to make it into something else. But you have to multiply that by a constant. It can't be by an x or y or anything like that. And you have to multiply the whole row by something. If you notice, we got to stay whole rows together here. If for some reason we want to, we could add some rows together. That is sometimes helpful. And we can do any combination of these two. So there's a lot of times we're going to multiply a row by something and add it to another row to make it be the way we like. So I am going to say, I'm going to do the first one entirely through. All right, and I'm going to do it here on the board, and I'll show you, but this way I can kind of show a little bit more maybe. And the little thing I have to prop this up works okay, but not the greatest. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is write down that matrix we had. All right, I'm going to try to hold it to the side a little bit so you can hear what I'm saying, see what I'm doing. All right. Now guys, to tell you the truth, if I multiply this top row by -1/2, -1/2 times 2 would give me a 1 in that spot. My very first goal, remember, I'm trying to get the identity matrix down there. So my goal is to get a 1 right here. So if I wanted to, I could multiply by -1/2. -1/2 times -2 is +1. -1/2 times 1 would give me -1/2. I'd have a fraction in my matrix, but it would be okay. -1/2 times 9, -9/2. I'd have a fraction. It's okay. We'd be able to work through it. Okay. Next, I could switch some rows. Wait a minute. Do you think you want this 1 up here? That would be a good option. And so I could take this whole thing and put this whole row up top. So for this first example, that's what I'm going to suggest. So I'm going to write my things here. Switch row 1 and row 2. So that's actually what I'm going to do. So I'm going to write 1, 3, -8. And then I'm going to write -2, 1, 9. So guys, I'm going to tell you this. This is your hint too, okay? Number 1, you want to get a 1 there. After you get a 1 there, it's going to be really easy to make this a 0 because we're going to want to add these two together just temporarily. So think of elimination, please. If you had a -2 and you had to get rid of it, what would you do to the 1 to change it? So off to the side here, would you agree to get rid of a -2? I need a +2. So I'm going to multiply row 1 by +2, and I'm just going to temporarily write it over here. I'm not actually going to replace it in here. I'm going to temporarily write it right here. So what's 2 times 1? Thank you. 2. What's 2 times 3? Okay, and then just to keep my perspective straight, I am going to put that dashed line right there. What's -8 times 2? I really hope that's -16, because if it's not, we could get in trouble. All right. I wanted to do that so I could cross out this 2. So right now, I'm just going to copy this down, and you're going to see how this kind of looks like elimination in a second here. So -2, 1, 9. I am actually going to do math over here. So what's 2 minus 2? What is 6 plus 1? What is -16 plus 9? All right, hopefully all these steps, and I know people can't interrupt me right now and ask questions, and I apologize. I really wish I was in person, but hopefully all of this makes sense. Please remember, my final answer is supposed to have a 1 in the top left spot. I already have it. My goal is to go like sort of counterclockwise around the circle then, okay? That means my next goal is to have a 0 right here. And that's why I did this work. You guys will do very similar stuff on the problems that you do. Notice there's a 0 here. I like this 0 here. So I'm going to replace, it's like I'm going to erase this row, which I'm not really going to do. I'm going to leave that here so those steps make sense. And instead of writing that, I'm going to write this. So I'm going to write 0, 7, -7. But the top row, I really didn't want this 2, -16 thing. I wanted to keep it as this. I just needed that to help me out. So I'm actually going to keep the top row as 1, 3, -8. All right. Please remember, my final goal is to get 1, 0, and then this is going to try to be a 1. Oh, guys, don't forget, if I want, I can multiply a whole row by something. What happens if I multiply this row by 1/7? All right, hopefully you're following along with me. What's 0 times 1/7? It stays as 0. What's 1/7 times 7? 1. What's 1/7 times -7? -1. So I'm going to write that next one. And guys, just because the rest of the work is not going to be that long, I do need one more little spot here. But I'm going to do the work that it works out, I promise. Would you agree when we did that, I should get the top row I left alone. So I still have 1, 3, -8. The bottom row is now 1, 0, -1. All right, guys, now that this is a 0, it really doesn't matter what I do to this 3. No matter what happens, this 0 plus 1 is going to still be 1. So that's nice. So now I need to worry about getting rid of this 3. How can I use a 1? And by the way, every time you work it around this way, this is always going to be a 1. You would always say, how can I use this 1 to get rid of this? And this time it's a 3. Other times it's going to be different things. So how can I use a 1 to get rid of a 3? Yeah, I need to change that to a negative thing. So sorry, my work's going to go a little bit backwards, and my final answer is sort of going to be right here. That means I need to take row 2 and multiply it by -3. Because if I multiply it by -3, that will make a -3, +3 cancel out. But remember, I don't want to do that forever. I just want to do that temporarily. So I'm going to do that off to the side right here. What is 0 times -3, excuse me? What is 1 times -3? What is negative 1 times negative 3? And remember, I'm doing that to get rid of this top one. So right underneath there, I'm just going to copy down that row. And now I'm going to add what's 0 plus 1. What's negative 3 plus 3? And what's negative 8 plus 3? Now again, let's think about it. I want the top row to match the identity. So that means I need an answer that has 1 first, 0 second, and then a number. That's what I got right down here. So I am going to write this in the top row. Guys, this would technically go right underneath here, but since I ran out of room, I knew I was going to be really close. I'm going to write 1, 0, negative 5. Did I really want to change this bottom row, or did I just need to do that to help me out? So I'm going to leave the bottom row as this 0, 1, negative 1. This is answer in augmented matrix form. But if I would want to know the answer to my system of equations, this says x equals negative 5 and y equals negative 1. And since we're solving a system of equations like you guys know so well, a system of equations better be listed as an ordered pair. So I know this looks crazy and it looks like a lot of work, but it's actually really pretty simple, easy work. So that was me doing it the first time so you could see all of that. And if you want me to, let me back up just a little bit here and move it down. That way there's not quite so much glare. And I'll pause for a little bit. You can hit pause to get the answer. But I have one more example. And if we were in class, I would just say, who thinks they know what they're doing? And if people said yes, I would call on different people randomly. If people said no, I would say, that's okay, just sit there and listen. So since I can't necessarily call on people and I feel bad about that, I'm just going to kind of take suggestions of my own and do things that I would think would work well. So hopefully you paused. Sorry, I know I was kind of talking through that too. But if we look at this, first of all, we need to write it as an augmented matrix. And sorry guys, as I was doing that, I already messed up. I was looking at that 2x and I wrote the x on it, so I apologize for that mistake in the first thing, that little blob right there. Now, again, we could, if we would want, there are so many different ways you could do this. We could, if we would want, multiply the whole row by negative 1/2. Last time we chose not to do that because we got some fractions. Look at this time. What's half of 2? A nice number. What's half of 4? A nice number. What's half of 4? A nice number. So if we would want to, and if you're listening to that suggestion, you want to do that, we could do that. Remember, we can add rows together. What would happen if I would take 3 minus 2? I would get 1. If I did that, well, technically I'm adding those rows because it's 3 plus a negative 2. So if I did that, I would get 1, negative 6, 22. I could write that in the top row because there's a 1 in that spot. Please remember what I'm trying to do right now, no matter what I do, my goal is the first option I could use or the second option I could use as long as I get 1 right there. So I've been talking for a long time and maybe you're like, Miss Jabs, why don't you just do it? Why don't you just do whatever you want to do? So I am going to multiply row 1 by negative 1/2. That's the way I'm going to choose. If you started to do the other way already, that's fine. Keep on going. Listen to me kind of in the background. Our final answers, no matter what you do, our final answer should be the same. Half of 2 is 1. Be careful, I know there's a negative. The first 4 is negative, so a negative times a negative would be a positive, and half of 4 is 2. The second 4 is positive, so that means that one is going to give me a negative 2. Remember, I haven't done anything yet to change my second row. So my second row then should still be 3, negative 2, 18. I now have to use this one to get rid of this 3. So that means I'm off to the side, going to take row 1 and multiply it by a negative 3. I'm going to take row 1 and multiply it by a negative 3. So if I take row 1 and multiply it by negative 3, I get negative 3, negative 6, positive 6. Copy down my second row off to the side right there. And I would get that off to the side. Negative 3 plus 3 is 0, negative 6 and negative 2 is negative 8. 18 plus 6, let's see, 18 plus 6 is 24. Did I really want to change the top row? No, so I'm going to keep that top row where it is. But I did want this one with the 0, so I'm going to put that in row 2. Ooh, guys, do I want that 8 there? I want that 8 to be a 1, so I'm going to multiply that by 1/8. Row 2 times 1/8. So that would be 0, -1. And 24 times 1/8. Guys, I know it could be division, but matrix rule says we're not really supposed to divide. I know that sounds kind of weird, but so that means that would be 3. Excuse me. We should have multiplied by -1/8. And so because I goofed up right now, I have a plus on that 1. Okay? And the last thing I need to get rid of is that 2. I have got to use this 1 to get rid of that 2. So I'm going to multiply row 2 by -1, by -2, excuse me. That would give me 0, -2, +6. I'm going to rewrite the top row, 1, 2, -2. I'm going to add those together, 1, 0, 4. Which means, remember, I want the top row to have the answer of 1, 0, which is what I have over here. So I'm going to write 1, 0, 4. The bottom row I'm going to write as 1, 0, 1, -3. And again, that bottom thing right there would be my answer, both in matrix, augmented matrix form and ordered pairs. So I'm going to hold it back here just a little bit. Guys, I hope this is making some sense. Some people like this way. This is probably one of my favorite ways because it's just like work through things. But I realize that it takes a little bit of time and a little bit of work. If you have questions, please reach out to me. Hopefully those 2 examples helped you out. Have a great day. And we're probably going to need to take a test next week. So if you could email me today and just tell me, do you know if you have any other tests next week or any other things going on? Because we need to figure out a time to try to wrap this up before we go on spring break. So tell me if there's any other tests you have. Just send me an email that says, Ms. Jabs, next week anytime would look good for a test. Please stay away from this day because Mr. Triplett is having us do a project in his class. We have a big paper due for Mr. Becker on this day. I don't really know. I'm just making stuff up. But if you could tell me if there's any major things you have going on. Thank you. Have a great weekend.